Yes! There's my favorite!
Negate!
My name is Riverium, and you are invited to come join my journey to either pop the fuck off, get railed by my opponents, or a combination of the two as I learn new Yu-Gi-Oh decks, both meta and rogue, over the course of a month. All condensed down into a 30-minute or an hour-long video for your viewing entertainment. Welcome back to the source.
It's time to fly, take a chance to make it all the way. Take a chance forgetting yesterday, take a chance believe.
It is so good to be back and yapping about Yu-Gi-Oh once again, as it did actually fall off a little bit on the channel, and especially this series, considering the fact that the last time I uploaded it was 3 years ago. Jesus Christ, I actually suck at making videos. Anyway, we are back finally, and I'm so excited to be talking about a deck I have actually never played it against, and well, considering the ban list and the release of Burst Protocol, it is slated to be one of the best decks in the upcoming format. As alluded to in the little skit before the intro, this episode is all about Radiant Typhoon, a deck that exclusively is based on the constant use of one of Yu-Gi-Oh's oldest cards, Mystical Space Typhoon. It essentially takes MST and a multitude of other quick play spells and uses them as pseudo activation requirements to trigger the effects of the main deck monsters, as well as finally making MST a negate as the legends foretold. It also allows for one of the least supported attributes in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh card game, being the wind attribute, to actually kind of pop the fuck off with some of the most amazing cards and support that it's got recently, which I will get to in the deck profile, and I will try and explain everything as best as I can. Which the deck as a whole, from what I can understand, is a mid-range deck, not making boards that do anything unfair or bullshit, but very much allowing you to gain incremental advantage over the course of your turn and your opponents. So, I'm going to show you the first version that I have decided to come up with for this deck. I would like you to bear in mind that the list I have chosen is not my own list. This was the list that I believe topped Hong's cards Burst Protocol tournament that was online. I can't remember off the top of my head. Most of the deck is the same, other than a couple of cards in the extra deck and my side deck within reason. So this is likely to change when I get to know the deck a little bit more. So let us start with the main deck. We are on 3 copies of Radiant Typhoon Swen. Yes, I am using a proxy. I do need a third Swen. Hopefully someone can hit me up with one. Swen is one of the best starters in the entire deck. If you have MST or your opponent has no spells and traps on their field, you can special summon Swen from hand. You can only special summon him once per turn this way. On normal or special, Swen can search you a Radiant Typhoon spell or trap or Mystical Space Typhoon. You'll hear that a lot because a lot of the smaller monsters do have that effect, that if you have MST in the graveyard or if your opponent has no spells and traps on the field, you can just special summon it from hand and they can add either the associated Radiant Typhoon card or MST. So essentially, a lot of the time you are adding a lot of spells unless you're missing the third MST, which you do actually need 3 MST in rotation a lot of the time. Then we're on 3 copies of Crozier, one of the few really good Radiant Typhoon main deck monsters that actually doesn't have the effects to special summon itself in the same way as the others do. It can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects, while your opponent controls no spells or traps. You can only use each of the following effects of Radiant Typhoon Crozier once per turn. If you would activate a quick play spell, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add a Radiant Typhoon card and or Mystical Space Typhoon from deck or graveyards to your hand. So essentially you can add from one place and one from the other, and vice versa. However, it does also mean that this card, despite it being a Stratos, it is also bellable. You can bell it because it does add from graveyard. Then we are on 3 copies of Radiant Typhoon Edlum. This card is essentially the same as Radiant Typhoon Swen, except it adds you a Radiant Typhoon monster instead of a spell. Then onto the spells of the deck, and there is a lot of them in comparison to what you would think there would be, well, especially for a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck. We are on 3 copies of Radiant Typhoon Chant, essentially the rotor of the deck. This also has another in common effect with the other spells, that if this card would be destroyed by the effect of a Mystical Space Typhoon, you can actually reset it. That effect is not once per turn, so you can always have access to them whenever you need them. The following effects are actually once per turn. You can add a level 4 level Radiant Typhoon monster from your deck to your hand, or you can add Mystical Space Typhoon from your deck or graveyards to your hand. For the next spell, we are on 3 copies of Radiant Typhoon Visions. This card was only really seen in striker decks outside of this deck because you are able to pitch one of the quick play spells like a Widow Anchor, Shark Cannon, and a couple of others to obviously essentially have a pot of greed. This card also can add, well, MST from your grave to your hand. Then onto the one-offs, we are on one copy of Megala, which, like Swen and like Edlund, can special summon herself from hand, and she has the effect that if you were to activate a quick play spell at any point except during the damage step, she can emergency teleport for any Radiant Typhoon monster. Like Crozier, which I forgot to mention before, if you were to activate this effect, you are locked into wind monsters, which, oh no, our wind deck is locked into wind monsters. However, shall we cope? Then we're on one copy of Radiant Typhoon Varunrun, which if a quick play spell is activated except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. When an opponent would activate a monster effect and you have a mystical space typhoon in your graveyard, you can negate that effect, and if you have 2 or more MSTs in the graveyard, you can destroy it. If mystical space typhoon is activated while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it. Then one copy of Radiant Typhoon Great Phoenix Phonix, which is probably not the name, but fuck it, we will. If a quick play spell is activated except during the damage step, like Varunrun, you can special summon this card from your hand. If a quick play spell is activated also except during the damage step, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, shuffle them back into the deck, so it gets around a lot of protection that a lot of decks have at the moment. If mystical space typhoon is activated while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it, essentially the same as Varunrun. Then we're on one copy of Ascendance, one of the new cards alongside the Link 2, which I will get onto later in the deck profile, which is really good. You can special summon one level 6 or lower Radiant Typhoon monster from your graveyard, so essentially all of them, maybe other than the big guys, other than Varunrun and Phonix. You can also add mystical space typhoon from deck or graveyards to your hand. And for the last of the Radiant Typhoon cards, technically, we are on one copy of Radiant Typhoon Mandate. This is the card that makes the legend happen. This is the card that allows mystical space typhoon to fulfill its purpose as a negate. Once per turn, you can target 3 quick play spells in your graveyard, including a Radiant Typhoon card, so you can have like 2 MSTs and then a Radiant Typhoon quick play, and apply the following effects in sequence. Shuffle them into the deck, draw a card. All wind monsters you controlled gain 300 attack and defense this turn. Once per chain, when mystical space typhoon is activated, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and negate its effects. That card is absolutely absurd. This card's really strong because obviously, as you heard, it is once per chain in a very similar vein to Appaloosa Bar of the Goddess. Actually, all for the Radiant Typhoon portion of the deck. The rest of it is quick plays and stuff to supplement it. If you want to be really pedantic, you have 3 copies of MST in the most cursed fucking form possible. 1 QCR, 1 OG Ultra, and 1 common. So that is technically all the Radiant Typhoon cards. Now onto the non-engine. We are on 2 copies of Sheena, the Twin Tempest of Celestial Dragons. This is one of the new cards from Burst Protocol. It's really strong. The first time this card will be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not destroyed. When your opponent activates a card or effect while you control a winter monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, then apply the following effects depending on what activated the effect. If a monster effect was activated, you can bounce all monsters on the field back to your opponent's hand. It does not target, including your own spells and traps. It is essentially the same for these spells and traps. This card is really good for essentially breaking boards turn 0, kind of, maybe, if you have a way to get a wind monster on the field, but a lot of the time doing the thing like special summoning a Radiant Typhoon monster, your opponent activates a monster effect, you activate this and then bounce everything back. Then we are on to the non-engine. We are on 3 copies of Ash, as well most decks are at the moment, which realistically against Branded Jokotel it's probably one of the best cards in the format. We are on 3 copies of Fua, which I think kind of ends the monster non-engine portion of the deck. The rest of the deck prefers to have quick play spells because you want to be able to trigger your big guys effects as much as possible. We are then on 3 copies of Fallen and the Virtuous. We are on 3 copies of Super Poly, which this card is absurdly good against Dracotel. You can essentially just remove their entire board, make Secretarian Dragon, and they just cannot play. And for the final main deck card, we are on 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. So now let us move on to the extra deck. We are on 2 copies of Radiant Typhoon Varunrun, the Marine Eidolon. This is probably one of the best cards of this entire deck now, as it bridges the whole problem that the deck has. This card requires 2 Radiant Typhoon monsters. It is actually a, well, as you can tell, it's a 0 attack Link 2. If this card will be a Link summon, you can add an MST from deck or graveyard to your hand. Then, you have the effect, you can target up to 2 face-up monsters, including a Radiant Typhoon monster, place them in their own spell and trap zone as continuous spells. If a quick play would be activated, except during the damage step, you can place a Radiant Typhoon continuous trap from deck or graveyard to face up on your field. This essentially allows you to have constant access to, well, to Mandate, which allows you to have access to constant negates, which I think is really good for a deck like this that requires a trap like that. Then we are on, simply put, vulnerable virtuous targets. We are on 1 copy of Ecclesia and the Black Dragon and 2 copies of the Albion the Banded Dragon. Most of the time, these cards are just to get more copies of Fallen Virtuous or have other like effects in the graveyard. Then onto the Link package, which honestly isn't very big. It's 2 Link monsters. We have 1 copy of Win and 1 copy of SP Little Knight. I didn't realize that this card was playable now, but hey, I'm more than happy to play the Charmers in my extra deck, as I do like them a lot. A lot of the time you can actually use this, take an opponent's floor if they've activated, make SP and then banish something, which I always think is really, really nice. Then onto the Super Poly targets. We're on 1 copy of Garura, 1 copy of Mudragon of the Swamp, and 1 copy of Mysterion. This should be a Secretarian Dragon, however, that card's money, and no one has them, and no one wants to get, no one wants to sell me them. That's it for the Super Poly targets. They are likely to change. Then onto the Exceeds portion of the deck, we're on 1 copy of Fortune Tune, 1 copy of Totem Bird, and 1 copy of Gossip Shadow as our rank 3s. All of these cards have some purpose. Fortune Tune is just a sticky piece of shit that you can use to eventually make Zeus. Totem Bird allows you to negate a spell or trap, and Bamboozling Gossip Shadow allows you to essentially change a monster effect into we both draw a card, which I don't think is all too bad, all things considered. Then for the final 2 cards of this 14 card extra deck, for the moment anyway, is 1 copy of Zeus and 1 copy of Typhon. The reason I'm on a 14 card extra deck at the moment is because I genuinely don't know what to play. A lot of people are currently playing the Doom Eagle Link 3, of which I currently don't have, and I do actually need to find off the top of my head. So realistically, I will probably just play another rank 3, probably something like a Sura King. I'm honestly unsure at the moment. The side deck in most, if not all instances, is entirely irrelevant because it's constantly changing day in and day out. But I thought I would show you to see what I've started with. We're on 3 copies of Perulia, which I still think this card is going to be really, really good, with Kano Vanquisher being very much back in the format, even though that Jockle is very much at 1 now alongside Case. I think the deck is still going to be in around a lot. There's also a lot of decks like Radiant Typhoon, for example, the Mirror. It special summons a lot from its hand. Mermail as well, because that seems to be popping off despite the barrier statue being now newly banned. We are on 2 copies of Droll, which now nearly semi-limited. Realistically, this card probably should have either got banned or gone 2-1. We're on the 3rd copy of the Sheena Twin Tempest of the Celestial Dragons, which I don't know if I want to play the 3rd one of the Sheena, but a lot of people play 2, then side the 3rd. 3 copies of Double Cyclone for, well, essentially, what is probably better MST in most, if not all instances. Is also a lot better against Draco Tail cards, which, because like if you set it, you're going first, your opponent sets like Draco Tail spells and traps, you can activate them, pop your own stuff, and essentially it gets you going. Then for the last 3 spells, on 1 copy of Call by the Grave, 1 copy of Feather Duster, and 1 copy of Triple Tactics Talents. I don't know a lot about, especially these 3 cards. The Double Cyclone seems quite good. The Call by is quite good, because obviously it's a quick play spell. These last 2 cards, I'm unsure. Then for the final cards of the side deck, we are on 3 copies of Solemn Warning. So I've just come back from the first locals with Radiant Typhoon, and I do apologize for no footage while I was at locals. I actually just forgot to record some. I've been playing too many card games over the course of the day. I sadly didn't actually do that well with the deck, all things considered, but I'll get to that in just a moment. I do, however, want to talk about my first impressions with the deck and, well, how I felt with it whilst playing. I've gone into this locals essentially blind with little to no testing. The deck is very, very, very strong. When it manages to set up everything it needs to, alongside a couple of backup non-engine quick play spells like Super Poly or Fallen Virtuous, it pops the fuck off. Being able to gain exponential advantage over the course of your opponent's turn seems to be very reminiscent of other mid-range decks that kind of do the same thing. I can personally compare this deck to Voices, Jesus Christ, I stuttered like fuck, as it sets up a very minimal board but has a very big focus on incremental advantage and essentially plays like a fortress deck. The deck also plays into hand traps very, very well, other than a couple of instances where I ran into them with my lack of competence with the deck, but that is definitely going to be solved through time and playing with the deck as a whole. I did, however, struggle a lot with drawing into a lot of non-engine quick play spells, and, well, consider the fact that you don't have a lot of reactive non-engine to work with, especially when it comes to hand traps specifically, so like Ash and Fua. I have definitely set for a couple of times and just pass, and when you don't draw a summonable card, it sometimes can just be GG's straight from there. The next gripe I seem to have isn't actually down to the deck at all, more specifically my crippling fucking skill issues. I missed the trigger on Phonics and a lot of the other cards a lot due to my lacking comprehension with the deck, and I mistimed my mandate negates a lot, and considering sometimes the deck live or dies by what you negate with mandate and how you actually use it, it's something that I will have to continue to learn how to as I played the deck. The locals as a whole was 3 rounds, and well, it's a midweek local, so it's not going to be very big. And when I said I didn't do very well, I meant it, unfortunately. I only won one of the games at my locals, which was solely on my opponent bricking like crazy, because he was also learning his deck as well for the first time. Round 1 was actually against Dale, someone who's not been on the channel at all actually, with his newly built soft-called Yummy deck. This round was the definition of my opponent having fucking everything. He managed to set up a full Yummy board alongside Thunder Dragon Colossus and IP Masquerade, because that's something they're fucking doing now apparently. And despite me being able to get rid of the latter two with a copy of Super Poly in hand, I seriously did not have enough gas or even enough cards to play through 2 Onion Negates, and well, game 2 was not much better. I managed to make a board, but when I got to the link 2 to activate its effect to search me a copy of MST, Dale impermed it, which means I actually had no access to Mandate whatsoever, and when he dropped the Evenly, I was certainly not able to claw my way out of it. So round 1 of the locals started on a loss. Round 1 was against Colin on his also newly built Rose Dragon decks, but this time it was the complete opposite of my game against Dale actually. Colin seemed to brick so fucking hard in both of the games we played, and it just didn't help him that the one time he managed to stick 2 Rose Dragons on the field to make one of the synchros, I had Super Poly and was able to remove them, which caused him to scoop and made us go to game 2, where he fared seemingly even fucking worse because he drew no engine and my hand was not much better. But considering I was still learning the deck, I definitely played it very roundabout and very awkwardly. I managed to take the win, but it seemed very awkward with the way I had done it. And the final round was against Adam on K9 Crystron, a deck I know relatively well but never really gave it a second chance, unfortunately. And honestly, this game was fucking appalling. Despite me slowly getting the hang of the deck at this point, I was still making major misplays. So much so that I had tunnel vision into turning off my entire fucking deck when I summoned his own Spiral Counselor to my field with Win the Wind Channeler. And it fucked me. I completely forgot that it actually affects both players, so half of my deck was turned off. The back row I couldn't fucking use, and I didn't really have a good link 3 to make. I actually completely even forgot I got a Great Fly from a friend at locals to actually just make and get the spell canceller off the field so I can boost my own guys. But unfortunately, it was just like the worst game I had played in so long. Simply put, it was not my finest locals performance, but that's what happens when you go to a locals with very little experience with the deck. So, considering the fact I didn't do that well at locals, what did I actually do wrong? Well, that's not really the question I should be asking myself, is what should I change? And, well, to start with, I don't think the deck is that bad. I just think I have a crippling fucking skill issue, which applies to both of the card games I play. But I did run into some things that I didn't really like all that much, or I definitely need to change. Specifically, to start with, Super Poly. It's not the card itself, because I actually think Super Poly is really good, and it did win me one of my games against Rose Dragon, as you heard in one of the previous clips. But it's more specifically, I don't have enough targets for the card. I only have 2 targets, being my Dragon of the Swamp and Garura. There are multiple other cards I could be playing, like the Secretarian for Branded Jogatel and Blue Eyes, the Axiom Picker, so what's it? So, Oracle. No. What the fuck is it called? Axie. It's a fusion monster. Where the fuck is it? Aha! Axon Kicker Oracle. I didn't know what it was actually called. It's a Super Poly target specifically for Holisu and a extra deck monster for Kenan Vanquisher, which, considering the fact that Holisu is now at 1, is definitely something I can think about, because being able to use it and then get it super polyed away is definitely something really strong that the deck does need, but it's something that I don't know if I will actually put in. And obviously Secretarian Dragon, as I previously stated. The side deck I also didn't mind too much, but I didn't like it because I specifically didn't know how to side with it. However, I didn't really like Talents or Feather Duster in the side deck because I don't really have a lot of decks that play into back row, so there's no mirrors, there's no labyrinth, there's no pretty much back row heavy decks. There's also not a lot of people that are activating monster effects in my turn. Well, there is, but I don't know if it's big enough to warrant playing it in the main. I decided to take to the Radiant Typhoon / Magnificent Duelists Facebook page to see what they actually thought about it, and their general consensus was that my extra deck and my side deck needed some work, but my main deck was totally fine and was really, really good, especially considering I don't know how to play the deck. So, after chatting back and forth with some people, I landed on this list. I specifically decided to go in a little bit further with the quick play spells and the Radiant Typhoon engine. As you can see, I have added a extra Megalo, which I think will be really good considering the fact that all of these cards are absurd. I did also think about playing the second Phoenix because it did get sucked under Cyber Dragon Infinity when I was playing against Adam in the week. But it's also one of those things where it's a brick. Otherwise, if I draw it and I don't have a quick play spell, which I'd fucking hope I have one, considering there's now 10 of them. If I don't draw one for some godforsaken reason, it's going to be something that I'm just like, oh, I have this card in my hand now, it's kind of shit. I put the Court Light in the main deck because it's one of these things where I think this card is really, really good, and consider the fact that it triggers Crozier, Megala, Phoenix, and Run, it's really, really solid for me. Put the Doom Eagle in, as I said earlier, and I also put a Secretarian Dragon in because this card is absurd against Branded Rickator. There's actually one card that I haven't put in yet, and that specifically was 3 copies of Lava Golem, which I will actually talk about right now. Lava Golem as a card in this deck seems to be really, really strong because Swen, Edlum, and Megala don't require your normal summon. You can special summon them and do all that stuff. The only thing you do lose out on is the access to Crozier's Tribute Summon, or the normal summon you would use for it. However, if you activate a quick play, you get the special of it anyway, and it applies to these 2 idiots as well. So realistically, being able to get rid of 2 monsters on your opponent's board and then being able to go full combo through Swen or Edlum, it's definitely something that's really, really good with the deck. Dimensional Fidget is a card a lot of people did speak to me about because against every deck at the moment, it's very monster central. Branded Dracotail and Yummy, as well as Mitsurugi, Ken and Vanquish Soul, they are really, really strong, and they do require monsters. Even though Mitsurugi doesn't give a shit if it's banished or not, everything else does. Ken and Dracotail can't actually play the game because they have to go to graveyard. Vanquish Soul can't get the stuff back from banished despite them also playing Dimension Shifter as a dark attribute. It's one of these cards that I feel like could be really, really good, especially at my locals, but I'm unsure. So I do need to test this list, and I'm hoping to get some better results with it. Hopefully it's going to be something to do with the actual ability for us to play the deck a little bit better, which at least it's something you go, I'm hoping it is. It is. Oh, it actually is something. I completely forgot that this was something I actually ordered. This was very fast. I ordered these yesterday, so I actually ordered. Jesus Christ, there's a lot of tape on this. Oh my god.
2,000 years later.
I have people to death, but sometimes, but fucking hell, they use a lot of tape. So we have 2 cards in here, one from the same guy. More specifically, it is 1 copy of Rosvelgard, the Desperate Doom Eagle, as I said. So obviously you have the guy right here. And one of the other cards that some people are playing in this deck is a really weird card. It's a copy of Noble Knight Shield Bearer. It's one of the weird cards in this deck that, just in case you don't know what it does, of which I actually didn't know what it did until I had read it, you can reveal this card you had, you can banish it to then search for any level 6 or higher wind monster, which the good thing is, or level 6 or lower wind monster, actually, should I say, wind beast monster specifically. So you can essentially use this as a extra copy of every single Radiant Typhoon name other than Crozier, which is actually other than all of the big ones, which is always very, very helpful to us. The main thing we wanted out of this was obviously the Doom Eagle, which is always the best thing to go for it. However, the Noble Knight Shield Bearer was something that I feel like could have been a very good addition to the deck, and well, hopefully it will be. And the mail seems to never end. I have received another letter in the mail, which this is actually a day after. This is not the same day, I swear, despite it looking very similar. I also don't know what's in this. There is one thing I could think it could be, which if it is, sick. It'll actually make this so much easier, and I'm really bad at opening mail. I'll put it on camera. It is what I thought it was. It is my actual copies of Fallen and Virtuous, which now means, if I can actually get out the okay, give me a second, I shall be back.
2,000 years later.
After probably what genuinely took me way too fucking long, we now have our copies of Fallen and the Virtuous, which really, really helpful to obviously have a matching set. And obviously this card, it's not come up a lot. I do, however, know how good it is considering the fact that I'm playing multiple targets for it. So we now have our copies of Fallen and the Virtuous. One of the things I seem to have neglected in this episode is the actual goal of it. Well, goals. I specifically have 2 in mind. To start and to get the obvious one out of the way, simply learn the deck. Every deck is different, and obviously in this specific case, Radiant Typhoon is on the harder end of the spectrum for me at the moment because I've seen very little gameplay of the deck, and I've not had a whole lot of testing in comparison to some of the other decks I've played on the series. But as time goes on, I hope to play the deck a little bit better, and specifically get good enough to possibly play it at the UK Nationals in this coming June. Mind you, Nats is around 4 months away, and I think I can hopefully at least get used to the deck by then, if an old familiar friend doesn't take over my testing. The second goal, and one that is actually closer than Nats, it actually happens within the next month, and that is the first OTS Championships of the season, specifically at my locals. Magic Mayhem are hosting their first OTS Champs of the year on the 7th of March, which is in the time frame that this video is actually being made. So towards the end of the video, you will see me play in said OTS Championship. My goal with it is to finally top an event of some description that's not a locals. That being said though, the players here at locals are absurdly good at what they do. As you have seen it many a time, Adam's been really good, Dale's really good, and there are many other players who haven't actually been on the channel all that much in comparison to obviously myself, Andrew, Alex, and a lot of the other One Piece lot. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to try. Obviously, as you can tell, the acoustics in here aren't that good in comparison to home. I am at locals however many hours early as I am normally on a Thursday. We are obviously at our midweek locals, and hopefully with the new changes for the deck, we are actually going to do a lot better. And considering my understanding, it's a lot better as I've had time to test since last locals. Hopefully, we should at least be able to take one game properly this time around. Second locals with Radiant Typhoon is done and dusted, and I have to say, it went so much fucking better. Despite still feeling rather green with the deck, I felt so much more confident in it, and I personally felt like going from a completely defeated record like last week to a X1 record today was so much better, of which I will get into the specifics in just a moment. But I would like to go over a couple of things in the deck that I felt like I needed to mention. Super Poly has become one of the MVPs, if not the MVP of the deck. It seems to be that the card managed to easily break boards every time I drew it, and alongside Full On a Virtuous, breaking boards with the deck and this specific combination of cards became so easy and so satisfying. After a couple of clarifications with specific timings on the Link 2 and Phonics, I really started to understand the deck so much better. My timings improved and my interruptions became more and more impactful. I also now have started playing around roll specifically. After a couple games in testing where it did ruin me to bits, I started to activate the quick play spell, the Searcher chant, in the draw phase in a very similar to way how Snake Eyes Asmin used to activate Wanted in the draw phase to play it around roll. And if I happen to have the Crozier in hand, I can special it and continue to pass without walking into droll. Round 1 was against Dale again, which seems to happen a lot, but I don't mind it because I really like playing against Dale and his decks are always so unique. Today was no exception, as he was on the main supported archetype from Burst Protocol, the Rocket deck, otherwise known as Dragon Link. But unlike last week, this time it was so much better for me. Game 1 I actually managed to set up the full board having access to Super Poly as well. Dale started his plays by normal summoning the Rocket Caliber in his hand, which I came to learn later that it's an extender, not a starter. After this, he would follow up his normal summon with the special summon of Absolute Dragon as he controlled a Rocket. I decided to think on the special as if, well, I knew that it was going to go to graveyard to search him a Rocket, but to my knowledge, none of them special summoned themselves in an empty board, so it would require most of the time to either have a Dart Dragon or another Rocket. So I decided to activate the Super Poly I had set, discarding the Phonics to fuse away the Caliber and the Absolute into Garura as well. They're both Dart Dragons with different names, which on the resolution would trigger the Crozier in my hand to special summon itself as Chainlink 2 and the Absolute to search as Chainlink 1. Dale searches the newly released Rocket Loader from Burst Protocol, and, well, as that chain resolves, I activate Crozier on summon to search for the MST and a Radiant Typhoon card. Dale quickly realizes that I can just continue to gain advantage faster and faster and faster. He would scoop up and go to Game 2. Game 2 was a significantly shorter game than Game 1, as Dale had managed to go first and make the full board, which I realistically couldn't break as it required an additional Super Poly on top of the Lava Golem I saw in my opening hand. And even then, I managed to break through most of his board, and even when I managed to get it down to a simplified game state, he managed to top deck the Red Eyes Full Metal Dragon, which in a simplified game state, the Omni Negate and the burn off of it can seal the game for him pretty much instantly. Game 3 was a very grindy back and forth game between the two of us, with me going first, and despite me making the full board, Dale managed to pick it apart very easily despite my Super Poly on the Red MD and the Rocket Loader. He managed to summon back 2 bodies off of Boot Sector launch to make Delingerous Dragon, which beat over the Magarura, which allowed me to draw a card and turn on his Thrust, which he used to search for the new fusion spell from Burst Protocol. He then realised that he actually can't make Borreload Fatal Flare Dragon as he doesn't have access to a Link monster, as he had to banish his Striker Dragon to summon the Red MD. So he had to make Borreload Furious Dragon, which, despite managing to pick apart the final part of my board, I still had mandate and a bunch of cards to shuffle back and draw. Drawing one Solemn Warning off of one of the mandate activations, drawing the second card in the following draw phase for turn, and the second activation I managed to hit a Swen, which is obviously full combo. I wasn't out of the woods yet, however, I still needed to out this Borreload Furious, which I did with the droplet in my hand, which I had actually sent the wrong card for it. Instead of sending the Swen like I was supposed to, I actually sent an MST, which actually led me to losing a Crozier, which, but considering I was going to add the phonics off of the Crozier anyway, it's not like it mattered in the end. On the crackback, Dale did have to deal with a double warning plus the Sheena Tempest in hand, which, considering the fact his normal summon got warninged, he couldn't get the gas, and we managed to take this win for the first round of locals. Round 2 was against Jack on Primite Blue Eyes, and this is a deck I have at least some decent amount of experience against, as I've personally played it a lot as well. So this matchup wasn't going to be too hard for me. Game 1, however, was definitely an uphill battle that I did unfortunately lose. I lost the dice roll and Jack chose to go first, and considering he managed to open up the whole stones against me, it was going to be one of those things where I could only try my best to see if I could break his board. And mind you, I didn't do too bad considering I had to deal with 2 negates, a double pop, as well as a bounce in the form of Jet Dragon. I managed to mostly bait out everything, but lacking an extender to get that final little push meant that I just couldn't play, and it ended on a Crozier plus a Fallen Virtuous, which would get banished by his Dragon Spirit of White anyway. Game 2 was a lot better. I managed to go first mostly uninterrupted until he hit the Link 2, where he impermed it, which meant I had no access to mandate until the next time I activated a quick play spell, which, given the fact that I had an MST as well as a Super Poly set as I ended the turn, it wasn't going to be too bad, as I managed to claw it back, and considering the fact I was able to use the Sheena to bounce back every spell and trap we had on the field, it allowed me to get the gas I needed to close out the game. Game 3, unfortunately, was a repeat of Game 1. Jack managed to end on a board big enough that I physically just could not break it, despite getting even closer than Game 1. I just couldn't get there, and unfortunately this was the first loss of locals. Round 3 was against Nathaniel on Branded Magistus Dracotail, and unlike Konami calling any deck with Fallen Virtuous in it a branded deck, this deck was actually quite heavy on both branded and Magistus packages. Game 1 will start with Nathaniel opening his turn with a special summon of the Fallen of the White Dragon by sending an Albion from his extra deck to grave, to which he activates its effect on summon to special summon an Ecclesia from the deck. I would respond with the Fua, and well, it kind of forced Nat into a line where he would have to give me 3 draws at a minimum off of Fua to even make a board that was worth ending on. So he committed to it, ending on a board of the Zoroark Fusion, which is a monster negate, as well as the new Ecclesia Synchro, which allows you to tag out into an Albaz as well as 2 set cards. The likelihood of both of them being Dracotail interruptions was quite high. I would start my turn with the activation of Chant in the draw phase to search me a monster. Nat allowed it, I searched for the Megala. The Chant triggered the Crozier in my hand to special summon itself on resolution and search me a MST and a Radiant Typhoon card. The Crozier effect was negated by the Zoroark, which was one less thing I now had to worry about. Moving to standby phase, I would activate the Vision to search me MST and try and pop either of its back row to turn on the special summon requirements for Swen, Edlem, or Megala, which Nat would promptly respond to with the Dracotail Flame, shuffling back his Arthalan to negate the Vision and draw a card. Going into main phase, I would normal summon the Swen and activate its effect to search me an MST or Radiant Typhoon spell, which Nat allows, and finally allows me to actually special summon my smaller monsters. But unfortunately, it did require my normal summon to do it. I would then activate my MST, targeting his final set back row, which he chains and reveals it to be his own copy of Fallen Virtuous, which he would use to send a Avalanchetus and pop the Swen. Resolving this specific copy of Swen did make me realise that I do need to actually sometimes play the extra Radiant Typhoon quick play spell, that being Manifestation. As I finished resolving the Swen, now would activate the Ecclesia Synchro to tag out into an Albaz from the deck, which I allowed. He summoned a second copy of Fallen of the White Dragon, which made me called by the one in his grave. I drew called by a lot this locals. It doesn't happen to me very often, but I'm so very okay with it. I would special the Megala from my hand and then activate Ascendance to summon back literally any name that I needed, because all I needed was the triggered ability off of the Megala on resolution to special summon a Radiant Typhoon from the deck, which was going to be the Phonics. I would then use the Swen and the Megala to make the Link 2 to search me in MST, which I did actually debate on searching it if I could even really need it, but I decided it would be too stupid to not to. I would then go to the battle and attack over the Zoroark with the Phonics, which seems odd, but it would mean he would only have fusion materials for the Mirror Jade specifically if he has branded fusion, which he would eventually add off of the Albalensis in the end phase, which I quickly moved on to after battle and allowed Nat to resolve his effects. Going into Nat's turn, he would special summon the Cartesia and use his effect to fusion summon, which prompted me to activate the chant to recycle my MSC, which would then give me a trigger on Phonics on the resolution. The chain started to get a bit wham here, so fucking stick with me. Chaining 1 was the Arthalion to add back the Crowley and the Zoroark fusion. Chaining 2 was Frixel to set a Draco Tail spell or trap. Chaining 3 was the Link 2 to place Mandate. Chaining 4 was the Phonics to target 2 cards, shuffle them into the deck, with the 2 cards being the Arthalion and the Ecclesia Synchro, to which Chaining 5 would be the Ecclesia Synchro effect to tag out. To resolve the chain backwards, Ecclesia tags out into Incredible Ecclesia, Phonics shuffles back the Arthalion, the Link 2 places Mandate, Frixel sets the newly limited Ketu Draco Tail, and the Arthalion adds back the Crowley and puts the Zoroark fusion back in his extra deck, which actually triggers the format as it only needs to be added to hand to special summon itself. I would then chain MST to pop the Ketu, as it means I get to keep them off Draco Tail names. The MST would trigger the Croja in hand to special summon itself on summon, searching me an MST and a Radiant Typhoon card. He would then synchro the Crowley and the Ecclesia into the Zoroark synchro, which would prevent me from activating the effects of extra deck monsters which use the same summoning mechanic as what was equipped to it. He would equip the Exceed monster to it, and actually it acts as its own MST, which he would use the effect to pop the Mandate, which I would chain as Chain Link 2 to shuffle back 2 chances in MST to draw a card. After this, he would normal summon a main deck roll, which on summon would equip a Magistus monster to itself. I would chain the Sheena Tempest in hand to bounce back every monster on the field, which meant that the effect to equip would resolve without its effect. Nat would then set 2 cards and then pass back to me, which in the end phase I would use Visions to draw 2 cards, and he saw the writing on the walls. We would scoop up from there. Game 2 was definitely a little shorter because, simply put, Nat couldn't find the Draco Tail portion of his deck. He only managed to find the Branded and the Magistus engine, which can only do so much. He ended on the Zoroark fusion and the Cartesia for the clapback turn, which I managed to open call by again, and despite being so far ahead, I still had to think about it a little because he had banished my Mandate and my Crozier off of the Draco Tail Sting effect. This is also the first time that the pushback effect on the Link 2 had actually become relevant, which meant I could push his Aurora into the back row and grind the game out into another win, which means our only loss today was against Jack on Blue Eyes. So, week 2 of the deck and post the second locals, I feel really strong with this deck. I feel like I know a lot more about the deck and I'm understanding it a lot better, which, like in most if not all instances, makes me feel a lot happier that I'm actually playing it. I want to go over a couple of things before I decide to make some changes to it. Specifically to start with, Sheena, the twin storm deities. This card's just strong. This card is really, really good. I've personally come around to this card a significant amount, especially as a 3-of in the deck, because my opponent going from 5 monsters to literally none, as multiple times as I've said in previous clips against Dale or Jack or whoever, Jack, Dale, and Nathaniel. I'm pretty sure I actually did all of them at least once. I think this card is just absurd to play, and if you don't play 3 of it, it's probably going to be sacrificed for something that's got to be so much better, which a lot of the times in this deck you're only sacrificing it for specifically Forbidden Crown, which most if not all instances I actually don't think is that good in comparison. I think it's a lot worse than just bouncing my opponent's entire board, either monsters or spells. I don't think it's that good in comparison. Yeah, it's a quick play, but it's definitely something I also will consider for this deck, especially coming up to Nats. I also would like to bear in mind that a lot of the cards in my side deck were really good in testing, but not as good at locals. Lava Golem was not one of them. Lava Golem, when I actually managed to play it, was really, really good. Double Cyclone, I never particularly used at the locals because it was only exclusive for Draco Tail. The time that I played against Draco Tail, Nat unfortunately didn't manage to hit everything he needed. Dimensional Fissure was definitely one of those cards. I played it a lot in testing, and I really liked it in testing, but I haven't really played it at locals because I never really got to see it, which honestly, it didn't matter to me all that much. It would have been a lot more helpful against Nathaniel. Solemn Warning, oh my fucking god. When I actually activated this card, it was so good. Against Dale, where I had 2 set, Jesus Christ, the normal summon of his Rocket Tracer was never going to stick at all, and considering the fact that I had 2 of them, I always liked this card, but it's never something I never really played. But considering the fact that Judgment
is at 1 and Solemn Report is not out yet. I think Warning is probably one of the best. And There Could Be Only One is technically a stand-in for the 3rd Lava Golem, as I actually don't have 3 Lava Golem. This card didn't come up, but it doesn't hurt us all that much considering every single one of our cards is pretty different. Obviously, Courageous Wing Beast, Beast Warrior, Beast, Fairy, Pyro, Aqua, and Dragon. Doesn't really matter to us. But I definitely would take it out. There are a couple of things I would change about the deck, more specifically the Albion. Nathaniel specifically spoke to me about the Dragon that Devours the Dogma, which I always thought that card was really good. I played a lot in Branded Dracotel for a while. Oh, excuse me. I think it's one of these cards that I probably should play over the second Albion, because Albion only sets Fallen of Virtuous, and in the game against Jack, my only copy of Fallen of Virtuous did get banished off of his Dragon Spirit of Light, which it definitely did fuck it over a little bit. The rest of this extra deck I thought was really, really good. I've not made a lot of the other cards in testing it, other than my Super Poly targets. Wayne I've not made, SP I've not made, the Doom Eagle I've not made, Fortitude or Gossip Shadow I've made all that much, especially at locals. Totem Bird, oh absolutely. Totem Bird in testing I've made a lot, especially against decks right now that are very spell heavy, like specifically Mitsurugi, Branded Dracotel, and a couple of other decks. I think this card is really, really good, but a lot of the time I'm not making it unless I have like 2 level 3s on board that are not like a level 3 plus Megalo, because I would rather just keep that on field to summon either the Ruin Rune or the Phonics from deck. To specifically change something about the deck, obviously I don't think I would change much about the main deck. I think the main deck is really solid. I've been liking it a lot, so I'm probably going to stick with it as is. The extra deck obviously doesn't change other than the one Albion being cut for the Dragon that Devours the Dogma, which here, there, everywhere, probably not going to change much. The side deck, obviously, I take out the There Could Be Only One and the Lava Golem come in. There was something I did want to talk about. I originally did have this version of the deck where a lot of my side deck is now actually filled with monsters instead of quick play spells. The reason I even made this version of the deck was to test something for the next locals, because the deck didn't feel very reactive as such. Like, I feel like breaking boards was a lot harder when I didn't have the specific needs to break certain boards. Like against Jack, Super Poly into a Secretarian Dragon would have just done it for me. So I'm trying to figure out a way to not have to buy a Secretarian Dragon, even though I would very much like to. And so I saw a list that topped the white, or that got like a high ranking of the white list. I'll put it up on the screen right now to where I found it. That was playing like 12 monsters and then 3 quick plays, or like 3 traps or whatever. I wanted to try this because I feel like it was really, really good. Like the mag, obviously searching the Sheena is going to be absolutely appalling, considering the fact that obviously there's a dragon. But the problem is that I'm struggling to side with this deck at the moment. It has actually bit me in the arse, because a lot of the time I don't want to side out non-quick plays for my quick plays, because obviously my quick plays trigger everything in the deck. So I took to the Radiant Typhoon Duelist Facebook page to figure out what they would do in this situation. As of right now, as I'm recording this, no one's particularly got back to me as of yet, but that's not the end of the world. I still have a couple weeks left to OTS and a 5-6 days to the next locals. So we are back from the 3rd locals with the deck, and I decided to make an awkward last minute decision. I decided that I wanted Ashes back in the main deck, and I tried to make the space for them, as there were a couple of times over the course of testing and the last locals that I feel like my going second ability was not up to standard with what I thought was becoming of the deck, especially when people gassed up the deck's ability to break boards with a slower quick play spells. I decided to, instead of playing the exact list I showed in the previous clip, I ended up with Ash back in the main deck, which was swapped out for the 2nd Megala and the 3rd Sheena Tempest, which actually made the deck 41 cards because I took out 2, put in 3, which some people don't particularly like, especially considering the fact that it fucks with the deck's consistency, and well, I would agree with them, but despite some awkward hands today, I didn't feel like it mattered too much. Round 1 this time around was actually a bye because there was an odd number of us today. And, well, sometimes that is very annoying because I come to locals to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And not sit around for 40 minutes, but sometimes it just can't be helped. So it's a free win, I suppose. Round 2 was once again against Jack on Blue Eyes Primer, and unlike the last locals where Jack managed to play through absolutely everything, or have absolutely everything every time he went first, and we always seem to open suboptimal board breaking, this time around we actually managed to do both. Going first was still just as strong, but with the new addition of the Ash in the main, it allowed my ability to stun boards going second to be so much better. And this was the set of games that I saw the full power, essentially, of Fallen of Virtuous, which, despite me now playing 41 cards, as I previously said, I seemed to draw a lot, which was really good, because every time I drew it, it was so impactful. And luckily enough, I actually managed to get the run back properly and win this time around. So going into round 3, we were technically XO. Round 3 was also once again against Nathaniel on Branded Majestic Stroke Hotel. Despite this game being totally winnable with both games, I actually managing to break and just continue to grind out. I just continually misplayed time and time again, and it did mess with me, and well, it led me to losing against Nathaniel as opposed to winning an entirely winnable game. But sometimes you just continue to misplay time and time again, and it leads you to losing. But the good thing is about losing so quickly sometimes is that your opponent can give you tips on what they think you need to do with the deck, and well, Nathaniel did just that. He gave me some tips as to some good ideas as to what he thought was good against, more specifically, some pointers about siding and what he thought was worth siding in and out against Branded Draco Tail, which was really helpful to me because I don't see the deck a lot, especially as like the midweek locals isn't as meta. So we got talking a little bit, and there are a couple of things I would like to change in the next build of the deck. So yeah, we ended the locals with an X1 record. With this mild abomination being the first, well, being the deck we took to locals today, I really enjoyed it, and I definitely liked having Ash in the main, but there are a couple of problems that I did run into that are separate from Ash being in the main, but definitely something you do need to consider. First of all, as much as I absolutely adored this card, and as much as I absolutely adored it at the moment, Super Volley is one of these cards that I'm really missing the targets for, and I'm really wishing I had them. So for example, Secretarian Dragon is like one of the best targets for this card, especially at the moment where you have Branded Draco Tail and like all the variants going around fucking everywhere. I obviously think that this card is absolutely amazing, but it's a little bit awkward for me to get a hold of. I used to have one, but I sold it alongside my Draco Tail core, so I'm having to buy another one, which hopefully should come before OTS. Another thing that I had a problem with was that this deck, if you don't have access to quick play spells, like obviously Full and Virtuous, Droplet, Super Parlay, it's really hard to out big monsters, but that is likely where Forbidden Crown comes in, which, as much as I think this card is surprisingly okay, it's just not that good in comparison. It's one of these things where like it's a pseudo board breaker that you can obviously search off for something like Condemned Dark Lord, but I think the slew of quick play spells we're playing already, obviously being Droplet, Super Poly, Full on the Batch was called by the Grave, I don't think Crown is worth playing over any of these, and honestly, a lot of the time I don't really miss it in the side deck at all. I don't really miss it at all, so I'm not really thinking about it. So I wanted to try and figure out a way to out bigger monsters. So for the final version of the deck, we are going to try and mitigate the problem, more specifically with cards like Underworld Goddess, because there was a time against Jack Say where I was like, I can make my Phonics 3300, but it doesn't get over a Blue-Eyed Tyrant Dragon. However, this is definitely probably not going to stick into the next version, because Blue-Eyed Tyrant Dragon specifically is one of these cards where it's like, you can out it with Super Poly, Droplet, Full and Virtuous, yada yada yada. It's one of these things where I feel like it's probably not going to be as good, so I can probably put something back in like the Gossip Shadow that I actually took out for it. The Secretarian Dragon is definitely staying in because I feel like it's going to be so good. The side deck is obviously going to have some changes. When my third Lava Golem turns up, I am going to play it, and I'm going to fucking love it because Jesus Christ, I've been missing it so much. I've been siding in my Lava Golems for going second to break boards alongside obviously Full and Virtuous, Super Poly, Droplet, but I've just not seen them because I just don't have the third copy. Bestials, which the thing is that I'm definitely going to cut the Duosworm because in my current side deck it's technically the replacement for the third Lava Golem, but it's definitely going to be something I'd probably take out. It's realistically going to be the third warning to come back in. The third Sheena Tempest is obviously going to come in going second, yeah. The Mulchi is good going second. Then these are just kind of like good going first cards. So Dimensional Fissure, I took the card out originally because I was like, I wanted to try something different. However, there are a couple of times today where I was like, I want D-Fissure back in. It's such a good cards to play, especially with this deck where it's like barely any of your cards are monsters. So you're like, I can not worry about it. And also you could pop it with your own MST. And it's just so much better. You can send it with your own Forbidden Droplet as well. So I was like, sick. It's so much good. It's so much good, so much better. And obviously some people are playing Dimension Shifter, which I don't think this card's really strong, obviously, but like where like your monsters are kind of like your main engine to get you to your quick play spells and mandate, it's not good at all. The Solemn package, I was playing through Solemn Warning, which I really like, and I was really kicking myself when I realized I could Solemn Warning Nathaniel's Ketu Draco Tail, which you will see in one of the videos when I do upload it over the next couple of days, as of when I'm recording this in like the last week of February. I definitely for sure would like to play Solemn Warning as much as I can. However, there were a couple of times where there were just another amount of like really strong quick play spells, or just really strong spells in general, that I was like, oh fuck, they don't meet the requirements for Warning. So I'm likely to put in the 1 copy of Judgment to stick it from there. Also, there is one other card that I do want to try, and it's Cursed Seal of the Forbidden Spell. Cursed Seal of the Forbidden Spell is probably only good into specifically the mirror, because in most, if not all instances, you can go Curse Seal, pitch a quick play, and negate MST. Your opponent can't use MSTs for the rest of the game, which I think is going to be really good. It's definitely something I'm going to test. However, I don't know how relevant it is going to be, because there's only one other person playing Radiant Typhoon at the OTS that I know for sure. But it's definitely something I'm willing to try in testing.
So we have more mail, and hopefully this is going to be one of the cards I actually ordered on Friday. Hopefully it's going to be one of the main cards we need against specifically branded Draco Tail. And it is the card we actually had asked for, and that is a copy of Secretarian Dragon. This is going to be one of the few cards that will actually help me a lot better in Branded Magician's Draco Tail and just Draco Tail in general, because obviously they're all spellcasters and dragons. They'll also be really good against Blue Eyes and a couple of other decks that I might see around at the OTS.
So with OTS at the end of the week as I'm recording this, I wanted to try and finally bring a list together that I was happy with. Luckily enough, we're not actually too far off. With the addition of the Secretarian Dragon we got in the mail, it means that the Draco Tail matchup for us is going to be so much easier if we can super poly it right. Against the deck, there's a lot of opportunities for it to be done. I'm still waiting for my final copy of Lava Golem to come in the mail, but if push comes to shove, I can just borrow one from a friend for the event, and we can wait longer for our one to actually arrive. On the screen is likely to be the final list for the events, and if there are any changes to it, it'll likely just be small adjustments, and considering the main deck has been fine all things considered, even with the advent of Ash in the main deck and the main being at 41 cards, I think we're probably going to be fine.
So, considering the fact that it's been quiet for the last however long, I do apologise for the noise, obviously, as you can tell, I'm not home. I'm currently at Alex's house because OTS is tomorrow and I love public transport. It doesn't seem to like. So when it comes to everything, I did one locals yesterday as I've been recording this, and it didn't go too well for the sole reason I tried one remaining difference. Obviously, in the previous list, you saw me playing 3 copy or like the the warning and the judgment package. But I decided to try and play Curse Seal of the Forbidden Spell, obviously for when it decks like Draco Tail, Radiant Typhoon, and so on and so forth. I didn't see them at the right time, and realistically, the Solomon, the Warning, and the Judgment are probably just better. But now the question remains, what am I actually doing? Realistically, the list from the previous point of the video is not going to change very much, and as for my confident feelings with the deck, I'm hoping to do fairly well. I'm hoping to get my invite, and considering the fact that it is tomorrow as of me recording this, I am a little bit nervous, but it is what it is. Hopefully, we shouldn't do too bad, and I shall see you guys in the morning. Alrighty, so we are here a little bit early. Technically, the doors at Mayhem open at 12 o'clock to people, but considering the fact that, well, I'm here fairly often, a lot of the time they don't mind if I'm here a little bit early. There are other people here that are also participating. Today is going to be one of these days where I'm probably not going to record a lot, I'm probably not going to say a lot, because I want to, hopefully, kind of pop the fuck off, which is one of the few times that I actually want to sit down and really play to make sure that I am doing, well, to the best of my ability. And hopefully that will be the case. Realistically, it's going to be one of these days where it's going to be a while. I am probably not going to speak a lot, I'm probably not going to have a lot of in-between moments, because we're going to go from one round, little break, next round, little break. That's probably the way it's going to go. It's not going to be a big one, however, it's going to be a long and it's going to be a draining one. Hopefully, we're going to do very well. I don't know how many rounds there are today, which realistically is probably going to be like 5 or 6, mostly. I'm not doing 6 or 7. Fuck you. But it's hopefully not going to be too bad. So, as always, let's do our best and let's hopefully up the fuck off. Mayhem's OTS was done and dusted yesterday, and it was a lot of fun. I'm recording this the day after because I love public transport. Because I'm not able to do these events as often as I would have liked to, I always find I enjoy them a lot more and, well, I appreciate them a lot more. That being said though, what was my record for the event? Sadly, it was not what I was looking for. A 2-2 record was what we were left with by the end of the OTS, and maybe if I had won another match, an invite to Euros would have been in our grubby little mitts. It was for sure a lot more winnable than some OTSs I've played in the past, but it's as simple as keep testing and go next. And that's fine by me. I'm not going to go over to the matches like crazy because this video is already long enough, but to snuff you guys of the specifics would mean that the cool montage I literally just did would be for fuck all. Round 1 was against Craig Need on Yummy Fiendsmith. A new version of the deck that seems to be popping up a lot more, and well, with the Advent of Radiant Typhoon being a bigger deck, it uses said Fiendsmith engine to make the Berthamet fusion to send Dearbells the White Witch to essentially have an anti-spell on legs. Game 1, I managed to go first, and despite me being greedy with Craig's Fua, I managed to take it fairly convincingly without needing the totem bird that I had made that actually nearly gave Craig the game, all things considered. Game 2 was where the previously mentioned Dearbells lot took place, more specifically backed up by 2 Yummy Synchros, a DDD Hiking Caesar and an SP Little Knight. Lava Golem was able to out the Dearbells and the SP because I had dealt with the DDD Caesar a couple times, literally like 5 seconds before, but still having 2 Yummy Synchros and a back row, I could not push through at all. Game 3 was absurdly cursed, a literal draw pass back and forth for ages, which did end in Craig using a side frame gear Delta to negate the only Radiant Typhoon spell I managed to draw in that entire game, which, with a top deck of a playable card, on Craig's end, he managed to take the game and we started the day on a loss, unfortunately. Round 2 was actually against Alex, who is normally on stun, and considering he's not enjoying One Piece a lot at the moment, he wanted to come back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And actually play the game with some new toys to play with and, well, a fun deck he used to play. So he chose the Chimera Fiendsmith Heckerhands deck, and realistically, I like that deck a lot, but unfortunately, sometimes it leaves a lot to be desired. Game 1 started with me winning the dice roll and opting to go first. I managed to mostly make a full board, but missing MST as he had managed to negate the Crozier, which would limit my access to at least 1 copy. But unfortunately, Alex didn't really draw too well off of the Fua, which, with an eventual shuffle back of the 2 monsters he managed to stick on the field with a Phonics activation, he normal summoned a Fabled Lurie, which I instantly popped with a Fallen of Virtuous, which made him scoop and go to Game 2. Game 2 started with Alex going first and me dropping the Fua in his draw step, which he negated with Ash, and well, that was the smartest choice as he made the full Chimera board to his limited knowledge on the new version of the deck, because well, he was not that well acquainted with it. But it was enough for me to lose and go to Game 3. Game 3, both of us were on a time crunch with 8 minutes left on the clock. I decided that I was really not going for double game losses today, and I managed to make the full board and have Dimensional Fissure out on the board, which, despite not being the best for the Chimera deck, it was certainly playable. Alex tried his best to crack the board, but couldn't quite see the line in 8 minutes, so he scooped up, gave me the win, and we went into round 3 with a 1-1 record. Round 3 was against Craig Aston on a deck I've not seen much, but I've definitely heard stories about, and that's the new Elf Notes deck, specifically backed up with a Fiendsmith and an Azamina engine, as well as the newly released cards for the Dark Magician stuff, so the Gaze of Timaeus and the Dark Magician of Destruction. This game was not convincing on my ability to play the game and play this deck, but I did still manage to grind it out for fucking ages. Both Game 1 and Game 2 went to Craig, and it seemed that, even though I managed to continuously claw my way back, misplays costed me a lot of my advantage, and my likelihood to win the match as a whole was determined by the fact that I also don't know a lot about the Elf Notes deck, which seems to do a lot of different things. The final round of the day was against Morion on his Azamina Dark Magician deck, and with the new Dark Magician support, it did a lot. Game 1, he won the dice roll, and he managed to end up with a board of Ilya Sylvia, Red as Dark Dragoon, and a couple of cards in hand. By considering the fact I drew Swen, Eldom, Super Poly, Droplet, MST, we were winning it from the start, there was no questions about it. The same could not be said for Game 2, because Morion starts with an activation of Secret Village of the Spellcasters, and considering my hand is 4 spells and a Crozier, I physically cannot do anything, so we don't bother playing the game and just go straight to Game 3, which had an issue arise where Morion had seemingly misplaced a full loss that was in his deck and on his list, which was awkward because obviously it was in his deck and on his lists. Luckily enough, Alex, who was on the buy, lent me a copy so I could just lend mine to Morion until we found it, or tried to find it at the end of the match. Game 3 was very much a repeat of Game 1 in all honesty. Morion went first, I managed to break his board with a Super Poly plus a Phonics activation, and we won the game from there, which led to our 2-2 record. We annoyingly couldn't find the missing forward, but luckily enough, Nat, who was also at the OTS, had a spare and gave it to Morin to replace the one he had lost. We ended up with a 2-2 record, as I had previously said, and despite the record being not what I wanted, it did show me that you definitely can't learn a deck like this in a month, and there were still a couple of things I had to brush up on. Specifically at the start, I was very much less confident in my ability to side with the deck. Even though I still have all the cards in my side that I actually wanted to use, I was unsure of how to side with the deck, siding cards in and out, and at what point, and what was actually best dependent on the matchups. And a lot of the cards that I thought I would need in the Mirror, Dracotel, I seemingly avoided those matches as a whole, and forgot about other decks like Yummy, Elf Notes, so I really struggled against them, and for future, I do need to keep that in mind. I also need to pay attention to what every fucking card does. Alex had used the effect of Chimera Fusion Engrave to banish himself and special summon a Berthamet and a Gazelle from the deck, which I could have easily asked, but because I wasn't paying attention, I missed the opportunity and struggled to get the game going back in my favour, and I lost that specific duel. And against Craig Aston, the Elf Note cards, I just seemingly struggled to remember what they did and actually realise what they did to my board specifically, as well as what their intricacies were supposed to be, and well, that's what made the deck so strong alongside my misplays, causing me to lose. A lot of it was also based down to my lack of research on some of the other decks that I didn't know was going to be there. Obviously, previously mentioned Elf Notes, Yummy I completely forgot about, and just overall, I feel like I needed to do a lot more research in comparison to what I did. I do definitely think I was in the right direction with the deck, but if I had a better understanding of the other decks in the format right now, I would have been in so much a better position. But sometimes that's just the game. And over an hour of yapping later, and me fucking sucking at card games, we are finally at the end of the video. I really liked this video being the first big project back after a while, and it rekindled my love for the editing process, my desire to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, getting better, just overall, to see what stupid shit I could cram into a video like this, and more importantly, displays my ability to learn as a player and show you what it's like to learn as, well, it's the only way you're actually going to get better at card games as a whole. And, well, with that, it will finally be all from me. If you enjoyed this video, ladies and gentlemen, and I fucking hope you did, considering it took me a real month to make and hours of fuckery, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below of anything you thought was interesting, funny, or just something you think is worth me knowing. Please keep it civil though, we are all adults. Hopefully. Have a good one, stay safe, happy playing, and I shall see you guys in the next one.